This is the first time I've committed the sin of performing a modern day standard YouTube rant. So, grain of salt this. Feeling a little punchy today anyway. Did you know that you can think an author or a work is trash and still read them and still recommend them to people unironically? I shouldn't be surprised about the way that people internalize criticism of works of art or of performers or writers or artists or what have you. I think if you go on the internet, you can get into an argument about absolutely anything you want to at any time of the night or day. But it is true within literary criticism and literary preferences that an individual possesses that you can hold two things in your mind at once. You can hold your disdain or displeasure or hate for an author or a work in one hand, while still deriving pleasure from consuming that work. You say things on the internet and people have opinions, and that's great. And I know that the Outlaw Bookseller is very fond of misquoting Harlan Ellison when he says, that it's important to have an informed opinion. And yeah, I couldn't agree more with the sentiment. When you go on to certain internet forums and you issue your displeasure with an author or a work, and the instant reaction is, one of outrage, the immediate response is being, you haven't read the books, or why would you even read someone that you don't like? And it's really funny to me. It makes me perplexed. It makes me laugh, and it makes me just wonder what motivates certain people to read certain things. And, I think all of us, individually, each of us have very distinct tastes. And we have an entire universe of culture to sample from and to enjoy the tastes with which we enjoy from this universal human thing we got going on here. It's perfectly okay to taste things that are bitter and to taste things that maybe turn your stomach. It's part of the experience of life. And it's one of the things that makes life meaningful and worth living and full of vibrancy and color. Your distaste for a work or a painting or an artist, it's part of the pleasure of consuming the culture that we're all co-creating. So why am I dissing on Andy Weir? Okay. Well, Andy, if you're watching, you have my deepest respect. Andy Weir is clearly not the point of this video. Andy Weir is a successful writer. And there are many successful writers and artists and musicians who are really bad at what they do in one way or another. And there are still many, many, many people who enjoy these things, these bits of culture, this work of art or a book or music, and they enjoy it because it's terrible. It's the spice of life, loving things that are bad. And when you look at somebody like Andy Weir and you look at his body of work, it's a unique example in terms of science fiction. One of the things that is most striking about Andy from the very beginning is what seems to be his own lack of internal context for the science fiction that existed before him. Add to that a willful intention of introducing this genre fiction to a wider audience who are also completely unfamiliar with the history of science fiction that came before these books. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. It's an objective truth, but it's okay. When you look at things like The Martian has a very specific audience in mind. And Andy, I believe, in many ways, was driven by ego in a sense to rise to the top of the froth of, quote, hard science fiction and get the accolades of actual scientists in their fields. Is there anything wrong with that? No. That's a perfectly valid motivation for writing this book. It's fine. The book itself, apart from being highly technical and technical in the same way that a junior high science teacher is technical, the narrative itself felt like the sort of narrative that you get from somebody who's only ever watched movies. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. It's fine. In fact, if I could give Andy any advice at all, I would say follow your strengths and stick to screenwriting. Andy produces works that translate to film very well. If you look at Project Hail Mary, I found aspects of Project Hail Mary incredibly entertaining. I really enjoyed Rocky. I really enjoyed the situation and the moral, empathetic conundrum involved. It was great. It's good storytelling. It's a terrible book. And it's a terrible setup. And it's a completely unlikely character. It's the sort of thing that if you were workshopping it in, say, an Iowa fiction workshop, they would take your manuscript and they would flog you with it out the door if you suggested that a junior high science teacher should be the absolute savior of mankind because of reasons. It's completely unbelievable. But it's a work of science fiction. And it had a great number of things in it that were both entertaining and valuable to me as a reader. I mean, you look at the egg, and the egg is the sort of thing that I can only imagine that somebody gave Andy an edible in the early 2000s, and he, sat down to that fresh YouTube algorithm and got pumped a whole bunch of Alan Watts videos and sat back and went, man, whoa, Alan Watts was on something, man, I bet. Whoa. And then he started typing, and he typed out the same story that 500 other 20-year-old creative writing students in 2006 or 2008 typed out, and then got hit on the head with by their writing teachers saying, no. Conceptually, it's a great story. You could even make the argument that it's calming and peaceful and meaningful. Personally, is it good? No. Is it okay if you liked it and you found meaning in it? Yeah. That's totally okay. It's great. Maybe you've never heard of Alan Watts. I think a good friend of mine summed up Weir almost perfectly. And if he wasn't a couple thousand miles away from me, I would have literally high-fived him. This is what he said. His words, not mine. I really liked The Martian because it was hard science fiction, and I feel it mostly did a great job at that. I don't recommend the book to people who won't enjoy the math and problem solving. I did not get any joy from reading Artemis. It felt like it could have been written years earlier and probably exposed his poor writing style to me some. I enjoyed Project Hail Mary much more, but agree with you on his poor ability to write relatable or realistic characters. All that being said, The Egg is one story I come back to over and over again. It probably could have been written much better by other authors, but it wasn't. And it's the premise that hits me in the empathy bone. I could read its message on a bathroom stall and be just as impacted. Andy, I hope that if you do watch this, just go to the ATM and take out some cash and just rub it here, okay? It's okay. It's okay. You're loved, Andy. You're loved, okay? Just rub it on your face, Andy. It'll be okay. When you add all of his works together and you put them into the context of science fiction, it is clear that he is adding a layer of context to the overall notion of 20th and 21st century science fiction. And that's fine. Philip Jose Farmer was one of the worst writers in history. Piers Anthony was one of the worst writers of the English language. People got great pleasure from talking about how terrible the books of Philip Jose Farmer are and how terrible the books of Piers Anthony are. Despite this, these books have not only an enormous following even today, but they have a righteous place in the context of the greater world of science fiction. And that's great. So when you say to somebody, I think Piers Anthony is an absolutely shit writer. I think his prose suck. I think that he's pretty freaking creepy. I think that the conceits of his books are the sorts of things that a 13-year-old boy would write down while he's trying to ignore the chemistry teacher. Yeah, I mean, these are all objective truths. I think that given enough research into the material, anybody with enough awareness would come to these same conclusions. But that does not devalue the work as a whole. Let's be clear and honest with ourselves about the fact that there are likely amazing works of literature that exist on the internet right now in a self-published form. Or there are amazing works of literature that exist in a manuscript on somebody's desk or in somebody's hard drive. And they will never see the light of day, even though they were competently conceived, competently executed, and would be fine additions to the grand scheme of science fiction. These things exist, and we will never know of them. And at the same time that these things exist, you have works of fiction that are objective trash, but they are successful. The success in either case does not define the ultimate value of the work. The success of a trash novel is what it is. It is the success of a trash novel. And the lack of success of a brilliant novel is not a reflection on the work itself. It just is what it is. So much of the literary world and what we know of it is governed by luck. It's governed by gatekeepers in the editing world. That's a neutral statement. I'm not saying one way or the other whether that's a bad thing or a good thing. There are obstacles in front of everyone with whatever content that they create. And whether or not those obstacles are overcome has probably a lot more to do with luck than it has to do with the objective value of the product being created. Trash is popular. Trash is fun. There are works that I absolutely despise, but I enjoyed reading them because I had so much displeasure in it. The books that you really hate, you just don't finish. When somebody reads a book and they say to somebody, man, this book was crap, it's not a personal affront to the person who enjoyed that book. It's totally fine. It's totally fine to enjoy something that somebody else thinks is crap. I would never fault the Marvel people for enjoying crap. There's so many reasons to enjoy it. Just simply because I enjoy it. That's a perfect enough reason. If I hadn't found value in Andy's novels, I wouldn't have finished them. In fact, I didn't finish Artemis because it was really bad. And I'm pretty sure that if you asked Andy would probably agree with you. Second novels are hard. First novels, you're trying to bend yourself to the market forces that will allow you to sell a book. And if you can do that, if you can violate your own personal code, whatever that looks like, in order to create a work that fits within the current cultural popularity, then that's great. You should be applauded. There are so many writers out there, myself included, when they wrote their first novel, they refused to bend to the popular market forces that might actually make their novel successful. And the novel, at least, I would say that most of those people who refuse to do that, who are incapable of doing that, they don't get their work published and they don't experience the luck of having success. Does that mean that we have to completely abandon the things that we think are valuable in a literary sense? No, but you do make a choice. You make a choice that you can write something that's appealing to everyone, or you can write something that's appealing to yourself. And maybe if you're really lucky, you're one of those writers who can do both. I make it my solemn promise to you as a book reviewer on this channel, The Book Report, that I will always recommend trash to you. If I read it and I find value in it, I'm going to tell you where I think that value is. You're the one that ultimately has to make up your mind about whether or not it's to your taste. But if I am intellectually honest with myself and with you as the viewer, then I'm always going to tell you what I really think. And even if what I really think is this writer is trash or this book is trash, that is not to be interpreted as me saying, don't read it, we should just completely delete these books from the history of the world. If I feel that way about a book, I'll absolutely say it just like that. That's my promise to you as a book reviewer.